In a new year, it is always what when after New Year's? It's winter here, and I live in obviously the Midwest here, and it gets really cold, it gets really windy, snowy, today is icy. So I kind of go for those comfort foods that are really hearty and delicious and can have leftovers to last a while, because I love that. So this is kind of a take on, it's kind of converging my mom's home roast with kind of a beef bourguignon type dish. And it's putting those together and making it more hearty on something that has a little bit more vegetable in it, but also that delicious beef that just becomes meltingly tender. It's actually pretty easy. It takes a few steps, but it is amazing. So to start, you want your beef. So I just use a chuck or a rump roast. It's usually a little bit, more economical to buy. And this gets a long kind of slow braise. So it really breaks it down and it cooks great still and becomes really tender. So I'm patting it off because it's nice to start with dry meat, especially when you want to brown it. And that's what we're going to do here. But we're going to first cut it in really big pieces. Like I said, this is taking a really long kind of braise. And what that's gonna do is you can see the ribbons of fat in it. And if you have excess fat like this right here, you can just trim some of that extra off the side. But really what that fat is gonna do over that long braise is slowly kind of just melt and become so tender. And that's exactly what you want. And that's why we have these big cuts of meat. They really are great to cook on long periods of time. So I'm cutting them, as you can see, in really big pieces. And that is gonna give us a lot of surface area to brown. And the browning, no. A lot of times we're told that it traps in, that it keeps the moisture in there. It really doesn't. What it does is it adds flavor. And so that is why we brown it. It adds a lot of great flavor, and that is exactly what you want here. You want all that flavor to be added because that's what's, as it cooks, it's gonna keep that flavor. So we're cutting them in big pieces. Right after we have them cut, we're gonna salt them really well. Meat needs salt. It's a lot of, obviously, protein, and it can be really heavy, so you need it to really have that salt to soak in. And I've said this before, we get scared at home of salting because we kind of have, a bad name for salt. But the thing is, 70%, I think, or something, of our salt comes from processed foods, eating out, things like that. So if you're eating at home, if you're cooking at home and making your food with real food, you're probably not gonna get too much salt. So I'm also gonna just lightly pepper it, and I'm gonna turn it to make sure all these sides get salt. I'm gonna finish salting, and then we're gonna go over and start sauteing. I'm taking the first batch of cut up beef out, and the thing is here, you don't wanna put all of it in at once. You've heard of, I'm sure, overcrowding the pan. When you stuff it all in there, they steam and more just turn gray, and they don't get that nice crust and color on them, which is gonna give you the flavor. So I wanna make sure to give them a nice, kind of that brown, beautiful crust on each one. So that's why I make sure to leave room around them. They're not fully cooked. And now I'm gonna put in the second batch. And it's one of those things, if you haven't done it before, once they release from the bottom of the pan, that usually means they're gonna be brown. At first they're gonna stick a little bit, but then they're gonna release, and that's exactly what you want. After you have all the sides brown, so you kind of turn them 4 times roughly each time, and sometimes you need to prop them up on each other. You get the idea though, you're getting them all browned. You're just gonna set it aside, it's not fully cooked, but we're gonna let those juices collect. We wanna keep everything with the meat. We're gonna just add a little bit more oil to the bottom of the pan, and then we're gonna add some vegetables that we have ready. So I'm gonna start with the leeks. I like leeks, anything I'm gonna braise for a while. I just think they have a nice lighter flavor, and they don't have that abrasion sometimes that an onion can have. So I'm gonna add those. I'm gonna let them cook until just they're softened, just a few minutes, and then add the other vegetables. The leeks are softened, I'm just gonna add the garlic just for a few seconds. I don't wanna burn it or let it get bitter, which it totally can. Now, if you're worried and you kind of overheated your pan, it gets a little too dark, you can always add just a little bit of the beef stock we're gonna use. That helps kind of break up some of that dark colors and the browning. It kind of glazes it just a little bit and helps it not burn. So once the garlic, I'm starting to smell it. Oh, it has, guys, you get that the rich, deep flavor and smell of the beef. We're gonna add a little bit of tomato paste. So this is something you probably see a lot of people do. And it's one of those things that what it does is it adds just kind of this deep, rich flavor that tomato kind of can when it's really cooked down, and it becomes really rich. You don't really know it's in there. It doesn't get tomatoey at all, but you really wanna cook it out because tomato paste kind of has a raw flavor by itself. But adding it in there and letting it cook and kind of create this almost this deep, rich fond on the bottom of the pan. That's gonna really add so much flavor. So I'm gonna let that cook about a minute. Then we're gonna put everything together just like a pot roast and put it in the oven. So it really is a pared down, easy version. And guys, once you get here, you're not gonna go anywhere because it smells so good. So we've gotten that deep, rich color from that tomato paste and it's doing its job. So I'm adding in now the vegetables I have ready. I have the carrots and I like to cut them really big because they're gonna cook for a long time and I want them to really be able to hold up and not just become mush. Some mushrooms. I use Cremini only because, you know what's nice about Cremini? White button mushrooms, when they start going bad, they look brown all over. Cremini are brown to begin with, so they hold a little longer, I always think. And I cut them big too. Some of them I just cut in half. If they were really big, I cut them in quarters. Some pearl onions, and they're not a strong onion flavor, but they just have that delicious light onion aroma, and they go perfectly with those leeks, and that really makes a difference. I just wanna mix those up so they're kind of combined. And then the beef. So with the beef, you want those juices definitely that have collected. You don't think it's just blood, because it isn't. It's also tons of flavor. So we're gonna add that back in there. Just beautiful. And I kind of want that, I'm gonna nestle some of them down in, but I like when they sit on top because that's when they're really gonna get that beautiful crust in the oven as it bakes. And it smells so good here. So we're gonna add some liquids and we don't want them to be what? Soupy. This is not a stew. This is not a soup. So instead we're gonna add just a little bit of flour. And what that does is it's gonna tighten up that delicious kind of braising liquid we're gonna put in there. It helps just kind of bring it together. It's not gonna be gloppy. It's not even gonna be really thick. It's just gonna lightly be a better consistency and not be so thin, because then as we serve this, have I even told you one of the best parts? Parmesan polenta, and we're gonna make a bed of it, and that's what it's gonna be served on. So you want kind of a rich sauce as opposed to just something that's really thin. So on top of this, of course, some beef stock. You can use homemade. I try to usually keep it in the freezer. If not, you can buy really good, better than bouillon or just a store-bought. We're gonna put that on top. And then we need a good wine. Now, I know there's gonna be non-wine drinkers. Honestly, I'm not always a huge red person. It kind of depends on what I'm having. But in this case, with this long cooking time, that wine really makes a huge difference. And you really kind of need it in this braising liquid. It has a deep, rich flavor. It's going to really bring out all the other flavors in there, and you really need it to kind of push everything together. So if you're not someone that likes red wine, don't worry. I love a Côte du Rhône for this. Merlot can kind of be overproduced and some of them aren't that great, but with the Côte du Rhône, there's not near as many made, so they're usually all pretty good. So don't worry if you don't like to drink it. You're gonna like it in here. I'm gonna add a few sprigs of thyme and a couple bay leaves. I know everyone's always like, bay leaves, do they do anything? They do. Don't question it, add it, enjoy it. Look at that beautiful, rich color. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let this come back up to a boil just to make sure it's getting warmed throughout. We just put in some room temperature or even cool liquids. So I wanna make sure they come up to a boil before I put it into my low oven. Once it does, the oven's gonna do the work for us. This is good. You guys you're gonna like it. This has come up to a nice boil, kind of a low boil, almost a simmer. And I'm gonna leave the lid off of it because as it braises, some of those extra liquids are gonna kind of cook off. It's gonna become deeper in flavor, richer, all the things you want. This is kind of the first slow cooker. So we're gonna let it slowly cook. Smell amazing. I'm ready to eat. This has cooked, and as you can see, it has cooked down, and one of my favorite parts, we're pulling it out to let it cool. You get the really dark, craggy bits of the things on top that the liquid has gone below, and so they get all that, just so much umami, flavor, rich, wonderful. Okay, so we're gonna let that go. I'm gonna stop talking about it. We're gonna quick make a polenta, and polenta's it's really quick. It's just a version of a cornmeal that is ground to polenta, and we're gonna cook it, and it's gonna be the best base to put this on top of. So in here I have some boiling water. I'm gonna slowly just add some salt, not slowly, but I'm gonna add some salt, because you wanna really season that. Corn can take actually a decent amount of salt. And then I'm going to now slowly, this is what I'm slowly doing, adding some polenta as I kind of whisk it, just so it doesn't get clumpy. If you just kind of dump it all in, it can get a little clumpy, so I just kind of slowly whisk it in. Delicious. While that is cooking, I'm gonna also slowly add some heavy cream. So the heavy cream just adds a richness. What I also like about it is you don't have to worry about it curdling like you would a milk. Milk can curdle. Heavy cream is a lot harder to get it to do that. It can withstand the high heat that we're cooking it at. I'm gonna let this come back up to a simmer, let it cook, and let all that polenta really soak in all the liquid that's in there. As you can see, the polenta has really soaked in all that liquid, the richness from the cream, the water, and it's this beautiful, just kind of thick consistency. So to really finish this off, we're gonna add some Parmesan cheese. I have it pre-grated. I always like to grate it from a block because the pre-shredded stuff has like a coating on it that I don't like. So, and I'm adding a healthy amount. Healthy, I mean copious, to make it really good. And I'm just gonna stir that in. I'm gonna do it off heat now. And it's gonna get really just creamy. You can, if you were here, you can just smell the richness of the Parmesan and those great kind of deep flavors of it. And it's ready to go. So I'm gonna bring it over here. I'm gonna let it cool just a little bit longer, and then I'm gonna show you how good this looks put together. As I'm putting this together, I'm gonna add in a little bit of butter. That is a little bit. I could have done a lot more. I'm gonna let that slowly just melt into the polenta as it's cooling off. What that does is it adds that final finish that you kind of want, but it also just adds a little bit more flavor, a little bit more richness, but also just really makes that consistency of the polenta silky, smooth, almost soft. So I'm gonna let that melt and stir in. While it's doing that, I'm gonna take out, we put in the sprigs of thyme. This is why I do sprigs. You can just pull them out at the end. They're pretty easy to find. Their stems just kind of hang out, no problem. Same with the bay leaves, easy. Look at that. What I love here is it's got a beautiful, rich, deep color, which is why we cook it with the lid off. That sauce underneath, it isn't just like, it's not a thick sauce, but it has just a little bit of consistency to it and a little bit of lusciousness. That's what that little bit of flour does. You're not really wanting to make it thickened or gloppy or anything like that. So I'm gonna take some of the polenta. This is how you serve it. You could just put it on the table. If you're doing this for your family, I totally think this can be a weeknight meal. This can be one of those things that you make for an occasion. I think it goes, for me, it goes either way. And it looks good either way. It's hearty and delicious, but also people know the time and care it took. So I love it either way. I'm gonna put a few of the, oh, guys, you get the vegetables. That's why I wanted those beautiful big pieces of carrot, because I wanted to be able to see them and not have them go to mush. I mean, look at that. You get it all. You get the sauce coming down. You can put more on top. I mean, just so I can tell you guys. Okay. Wow. That is, this is one of my favorite meals. The polenta is the perfect base of a really deep, rich flavor with the Parmesan that gives it a nice pop, but then it also just marries so well with this long cooked braised beef that just melts apart. I had a little piece there, but it just falls apart, and that's what I love, is that that's what the cooking really does. You don't need a knife with this. All you need is just to melt it apart and just eat it, because it's that good. And it just falls apart in your mouth, and yet it has such good, deep flavor. I hope you try this, because this is one of those marriages of that perfect meal that your grandma, my grandma and mom always make. A delicious pot roast with a little bit of those elements of a longer time beef bourguignon with the deep, rich flavors, the wine and all the added things. It's putting those two together and making something you could really do on a weeknight. It takes a little bit longer cooking time, but you could also just do it on a weekend and have your house smelling amazing, like today when the snow is flying and kind of sleety outside. This is what I crave. So I hope you try it. Most of all, I hope you share it around. That helps me the most, but it also just helps so many people see how easy this is. So tag friends, share it around. Check the website, wiseguide.com, for this recipe, other amazing recipes. And as always, if I can do it, you can do it. We can all do it. It's that easy. So go try this, enjoy. We all need it.